All right, so we are still fighting the war in Japan, so don't forget that. So let's go to Japan. Speaking of Japan, let's go to them and talk about the war in the Pacific for a minute, okay? Now, when we joined the war, we agreed that despite the fact that it was the Japanese that actually attacked us at Pearl Harbor, that it was the defeat of the Nazis that would be our first priority. So we did not wait until victory in Europe, however, to strike Japan. We went right to war with both. The war in the Pacific was led by a man named Douglas MacArthur, General Douglas MacArthur. And he was kind of a cool cat, kind of like Wes. He wore glasses and sunglasses, and he smoked a corncob pipe, and he was your typical military guy that really just looked like a military general when you think about a military general. He's a pretty famous general. He's not only going to win the battle or win the fight in Japan, but he is also going to fight in the Korean War, which is coming up soon. Okay? All right. So, fought many battles in Japan, and I don't mean to diminish the war in Japan because it was a pretty brutal battle. The Japanese fought very harshly. You've probably heard of kamikaze pilots. Those were those that were willing to commit suicide to bring honor to their country and their family. They would take their planes and like drive it into a battleship or drive it into something, committing suicide. Committing suicide. So don't kill yourself. It's never worth it.
Don't kill yourself.
Never. Not even for war, kids.
Not even
okay.
for war.
All right. So anyway, pretty crazy stuff, but they would do it, and it was a pretty brutal battle. Winning the Battle of Midway was a very important and turning point for the United States, where we start taking islands and territory back from Japan. So very fortunate that we were able to finally do that. However, the war in Europe is now over, and now what do? Do we continue fighting in Japan? How long is this war going to go on? And it's really going to be a big thing because we are kind of counting on the Soviets once they're done fighting in Europe to come help us, but we don't really want to rely on Stalin for anything because he's a bad dude. We don't like him, and being indebted to Stalin is not a good thing, okay? So we are going to be talking about a way to end this without Stalin. Okay, now, again, this is the world's best kept secret because we were developing this through the Office of Scientific Research and Development, that OSRD that we talked about in our last video. Okay, we were aware that we were developing this. Roosevelt had started the project, but now that Roosevelt was dead, we have his vice president that needs to make a decision as to what to do with this, okay? He is handed a note that basically says, we have the ability to end this war tomorrow, Mr. Truman. If you would like to end this war, you can do it. Now, again, he was aware that there was a project, but he didn't really know the capacity or scope of what was happening. Even as vice president under Roosevelt, he didn't know this. He didn't know it because it was such a top secret operation that was going on. At one point in the development of the Manhattan Project, there were over 600,000 people involved in that project. However, a very, very small handful actually knew what they were doing. It was one of those kind of jobs that you show up and it was a need to know basis, and your job is to do this, your job is to do that, and you would do it. You wouldn't ask questions because nobody would answer your question as to exactly what you were doing or why you were doing it. So as many people as had been working on that project, very few actually knew the entire thing and what was happening and what was going on. Okay, now work on the atomic bomb began in 1942 after a group of scientists had achieved atomic reaction in Chicago. But again, not even Truman was aware of all of this until after Roosevelt died and Truman became president. And he, had to make this decision. Do we do this now that the war in Europe is over? Do we make this controversial decision to drop bombs? Now, guys, If you know anything about the United States, it is not usually our policy to go and kill women and children, okay? This is not something that we like to do. This is not something that we, even in a state of war, you know, we tend to like to focus on military sites. We'll go in and, you know, fight a battle when we need to fight a battle. But, you know, going in and murdering women and children by dropping bombs on major cities is not really our thing. However, how long is this war going to go on? Okay, how many more people are going to die if we continue fighting this war in Japan? Then we have to make a deal with the devil, which is the Soviets, and do we want to do that? You know, how do we proceed from here? So it's a controversial decision to drop the atomic bomb. Okay, but Truman feels like it is in the best interest, now that we have won the war in Europe, that we are going to go ahead and drop these bombs on Japan to officially end the war in Japan. Okay. Oh, my notes went away. Why? Because there's no internet.